Tonight, the war in the Middle East crossed a line that every oil market analyst, every energy minister, and every central banker on the planet has been dreading since February 28. Donald Trump just bombed Kharg Island, and nothing about this conflict will ever look the same again. Kharg Island is a 5-mile stretch of land sitting off the Iranian coast in the Persian Gulf. It handles roughly 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. For 14 days of war, it sat untouched. Both sides seemed to understand, without saying it out loud, that striking Kharg was a different kind of escalation. Striking Kharg meant the war was no longer about missiles and military bases. It meant the war was about oil, about the global economy, about who controls the energy that powers cities from Tokyo to Berlin to Mumbai, about whose currency prices the barrels that keep the modern world moving. Then Trump announced it himself on Truth Social. His words were precise and deliberate. Moments ago, at my direction, the United States Central Command executed one of the most powerful bombing raids in the history of the Middle East, and totally obliterated every military target on Kharg Island. He then added the threat that turns this from a military strike into an economic ultimatum. If Iran continues blocking ships from traversing the Strait of Hormuz, the oil infrastructure would be next, not the military targets. The oil infrastructure itself. Every military target obliterated, oil infrastructure next. If Hormuz stays closed, let that sit. Here is the conflict pair that defines day 15. Trump bombed the island that handles 90% of Iranian oil exports at almost the exact same moment. Iran announced it is considering allowing a limited number of oil tankers to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, but only if the oil is traded in Chinese yuan, not dollars yuan. Iran just offered to reopen the world's most critical energy choke point, and the price of that offer is the abandonment of the petrodollar system that has anchored American financial power for 50 years. 2 moves. Same hour. One destroys Iran's export infrastructure. The other offers to restore global oil flow in exchange for something Washington cannot accept without losing something far more valuable than the strait itself. This is no longer just a war about nuclear weapons. This is a war about who controls the economic architecture of the world. And on day 15, both sides made their most consequential moves yet. Start with Kharg because the island's significance goes far beyond the numbers, and the numbers are already catastrophic. Iran exports approximately 1.5 million barrels of oil per day. 90% of that, 1.35 million barrels, flows through Kharg Island's loading terminals every single day. To put that in perspective, that is more oil than the entire daily production of Kuwait, more than Libya produces, more than the entire North Sea outputs on its best day. It all moves through one island, 5 miles wide, sitting in the Persian Gulf, that the United States just bombed. The infrastructure on Kharg represents 5 decades of engineering and tens of billions of dollars of investment. The submarine pipelines that run from the Iranian mainland to the island's offshore mooring buoys. The above-ground storage tanks holding hundreds of millions of barrels of crude before it loads onto supertankers. The loading arms and manifolds that transfer hundreds of thousands of barrels per hour. The power generation systems that run all of it. The desalination units that provide fresh water to the workers who keep those systems running. None of this can be rebuilt in weeks. None of it can be replaced in months. A full reconstruction of Kharg's loading capacity, if completely destroyed, would take between 3 and 5 years and cost upward of $8 billion. If the oil infrastructure, not just the military target struck tonight, but the refineries and loading terminals themselves, is hit in a follow-up raid, Iran's ability to fund its own war effort does not slow. It stops. The IRGC runs on oil revenue. The proxies in Lebanon and Yemen and Iraq run on oil revenue. The missiles raining down on Israel, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, and Bahrain for 15 days are paid for with oil revenue. Hezbollah's weapons stockpiles are replenished with oil revenue. The Houthis, who shut down Red Sea shipping for months in 2024, operated on oil revenue. The entire axis of resistance that Iran has spent for decades and hundreds of billions of dollars building depends on one thing: Iran's ability to sell crude oil to the world, and that ability runs through Kharg Island. China buys 90% of Iran's exports. And China was watching every satellite feed of Kharg Island as the bombs fell on Friday night. That is not a coincidence. That is the most important geopolitical triangle of this entire war, playing out in real time over a burning island in the Persian Gulf. Here is what Beijing is calculating right now. If Iran's oil infrastructure is destroyed, China loses its primary sanctioned oil supplier at a moment when its own economy is absorbing the shock of $100 oil and massively disrupted global shipping. But if Iran survives, if Kharg's terminals are damaged but not destroyed, if the follow-up strike Trump threatened never materializes, China is now holding a card that no previous geopolitical crisis has ever put in its hand. An offer to reopen the world's most critical energy corridor, priced in yuan. China has been paying in yuan for Iranian crude for years. It has been building yuan-settled oil trading infrastructure across Asia for a decade. The Shanghai International Energy Exchange was established specifically to price oil in yuan. Saudi Arabia has been in quiet negotiations about Yuan oil pricing since 2022. Russia has been trading energy in Yuan since Western sanctions forced it out of dollar markets. The architecture for a Yuan-denominated energy market already exists. Iran's offer does not create something new. It activates something that has been waiting for exactly this kind of crisis to go from marginal to mainstream. International oil is almost entirely traded in dollars. The petrodollar system, the arrangement by which oil is priced and settled in U.S. currency, has been the structural foundation of American financial power since the 1970s. It is the reason the United States can run the deficits it runs. It is the reason the dollar remains the world's reserve currency. It is the reason American sanctions have teeth. If you want oil, you need dollars. If you need dollars, you operate inside the American financial system. If you operate inside that system, American sanctions can reach you anywhere on earth. Yuan-priced Hormuz oil breaks every link in that chain simultaneously. Saudi Arabia needs the Strait open. Japan needs the Strait open. South Korea needs the Strait open. India needs the Strait open. If the only way to reopen it is to price the oil flowing through it in yuan, the question becomes whether those countries choose the Strait or the dollar. And the answer to that question may be the most consequential geopolitical decision of the next decade. And Iran, a country that has spent 45 years under American sanctions, understands precisely what it is offering and to whom. Brent crude has risen 41.5% since February 28. U.S. crude has surged 47%. The average price of gasoline in America hit $3.63 a gallon on Friday, a 22-month high. Goldman Sachs revised its 2026 oil price forecast upward by 20% this week, and the International Energy Agency released 400 million barrels from global strategic reserves, the largest emergency intervention in the agency's 50-year history, and oil barely moved. 400 million barrels sounds enormous. Global daily consumption is 100 million barrels. That is 4 days of supply, released into a market where the world's most critical energy corridor has been effectively closed for 15 days with no reopening date on any calendar. The math does not work in Washington's favor. It has not worked for 2 full weeks, and bombing Kharg tonight did not improve it. If anything, it raised the stakes on the Yuan offer in a way the White House may not have fully calculated before the bombs dropped. Now Mojtaba Khomeini, because the supreme leader who has not shown his face in 15 days, responded to the Kharg bombing with a silence more alarming than any statement could be, and that silence raises a question that nobody in any intelligence agency on earth has publicly answered. Is Iran's supreme leader still capable of commanding the force that controls the Strait of Hormuz? Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said Friday he believes Khomeini is wounded and likely disfigured. His exact words: "We know the new so-called not-so-supreme leader is wounded and likely disfigured." Trump told Fox Radio he thinks Khomeini is damaged but probably alive in some form. Vice President J.D. Vance told reporters in North Carolina he knows Khomeini is hurt but cannot confirm how badly. 3 different characterizations. 3 senior American officials, the same man, the same day. None of them used the word confirmed. None of them said the intelligence was definitive. All 3 hedged in ways that suggest Washington knows something but cannot verify it with the precision that would be required to announce it publicly. Khomeini's first and only communication since taking power came through a photograph on a screen and a news anchor reading his words aloud. No video, no audio, no live appearance. He communicated through Telegram, the messaging app, because showing his face on a broadcast would tell Israeli or American forces exactly where to aim. He has not been seen in public since the Assembly of Experts elected him on March 8. That is 7 days of complete invisibility. For the most powerful man in Iran, in the middle of the most intense military campaign against his country in its modern history, while cities are being bombed around the clock. The analysts who track Iranian power structures are deeply unsettled by this silence. Alex Vatanka at the Middle East Institute said Khomeini is being hunted down essentially. Suzanne Maloney at the Brookings Institution said the longer he remains absent, the more concerns there will be about the stability of this new leadership and the regime as a whole. Those are not fringe observers. Those are the most respected Iran analysts in Washington. And what they are saying is that the Islamic Republic's new leader is a man in hiding, communicating through a photograph, running a war through intermediaries, in a command structure that has had 40 senior officials killed in the opening hours of the conflict. The question of command coherence matters enormously right now, because Trump just triggered Khomeini's 5th commitment, the one that says if Iran's energy infrastructure is targeted, Iran will set the region's oil and gas on fire. The IRGC commanders holding that mandate are sitting next to mobile missile launchers on a 2,000-kilometer coastline. They are pointing at Saudi oil fields, Emirati gas terminals, and Kuwaiti refineries. They are waiting for orders, and nobody can confirm with certainty whether those orders are coming from a functional supreme leader or from a command structure operating on institutional momentum with no clear authority at the top. In the Gulf, the attacks did not pause while all of this unfolded. The UAE intercepted 7 ballistic missiles and 27 drones on Friday alone. Saudi Arabia destroyed 38 drones that breached its airspace in 2 separate waves, one targeting the eastern oil region, one targeting the diplomatic quarter in Riyadh, where foreign embassies are concentrated. Bahrain has now intercepted 114 missiles and 190 drones since February 28, a country of 1.5 million people absorbing sustained fire for 15 days running. Kuwait's power grid took damage from intercepted debris for the 3rd time this week. 6 Kuwaiti civilians have been killed since the war began, including an 11-year-old girl killed by shrapnel on March 4. Dubai International Airport, the most connected aviation hub between East and West, through which 90 million passengers pass every year, was struck by Iranian drones. Australia ordered non-essential officials to evacuate the UAE while it is still safe. That phrase appeared in an official Australian government advisory about the most economically dynamic city in the Arab world. Iraq shut its port operations after an Indian crew member was killed during an Iranian attack on a US-owned oil tanker in Iraqi territorial waters. A French soldier was killed in an Iranian drone strike in Iraqi Kurdistan, the first NATO nation casualty of the war. The attack struck a base housing foreign forces in the semi-autonomous Kurdish region. It has not yet produced a formal NATO Article 5 consultation, but it has produced urgent conversations in Brussels and Paris that were not happening a week ago. The U.S. Army has deployed 10,000 AI-powered MIROPS interceptor drones to the Middle East. Each costs $14,000 to $15,000, a direct response to the unsustainable math of $20,000. Iranian Shaheeds exhausting $2 million Patriot interceptors at 100 to 1. The same MIROPS system has already downed more than 1,000 Iranian-made drones in Ukraine. A Marine Expeditionary Unit of 2,200 personnel is being ordered from Okinawa to the Middle East. More than 250 American organizations have signed a letter demanding Congress halt war funding. The $11.3 billion spent in the first 6 days, $5.50 for every American per day, has grown to a total the Pentagon will not disclose until the mission is complete. The War Powers Act clock stands at 46 days until April 28, Senator Lindsey Graham told reporters. Friday, I do not see this conflict ending today. Trump bombed Kharg Island tonight. Iran's answer came before the smoke cleared, not from a supreme leader no one has seen in 15 days, but from the structure of an offer that reframes the entire war. Reopen Hormuz, pay in Yuan. Watch Washington choose between the Strait and the dollar. That is the binary day 15 has produced. Not peace or war, not deal or bombs. A choice between the waterway that powers the global economy and the financial architecture that makes American power possible. The Kharg Island terminals are either still burning or already being assessed for what comes next. What the IRGC does in the next 72 hours, whether it executes the abandonment of all restraint its parliament speaker promised, whether Mojtaba Khomeini surfaces to confirm he is alive and in command, whether Beijing signals it is ready to be the buyer of a Yuan-denominated Hormuz will determine whether this war finds its first real off-ramp or accelerates into something the world's financial system was never designed to survive. The Kremlin is watching all of this with its own quiet calculation. Russia's Dmitry Peskov told reporters Friday that discussions are underway between Moscow and Washington about ways of cooperating to stabilize energy markets. He called it obvious that US-Russia interaction on energy markets could and should be an important stabilizing factor. The same week, Trump gave Russia a temporary 30-day waiver to sell sanctioned oil stranded at sea. The Kremlin is openly describing cooperative discussions with Washington on the exact market that funds Russia's war in Ukraine. France's Emmanuel Macron said publicly that the Hormuz crisis does not justify lifting sanctions on Russia. The European alliance is fracturing at its edges. Germany's foreign ministry issued a statement calling for restraint. The United Kingdom is caught between its Atlantic commitments and the economic reality that British companies are absorbing enormous losses from disrupted Gulf trade routes. And Putin, who Trump called this week to hear denials that Russian intelligence had been sharing targeting data on American warships, is positioning himself as an indispensable stabilizing partner in an energy crisis that his adversary's war created. That is not an accident. That is a strategy 20 years in the making, finally arriving at its moment. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. Day 16 begins in hours. Tell me in the comments, do you believe Iran accepts military defeat to protect what is left of its oil infrastructure? Or does the clenched fist his father left behind tell you exactly what the IRGC will do next?